Vanguard's Divine Set 10 is now out in Japan, and of course it's time to do our first impressions, but this time around we're going to make it a little bit different. Usually I do these very much in just podcast style, kind of read through all the cards and then give a rating of the whole nation at the end, but today I want to kind of skip some of the filler comments and really just focus on the actual proper, somewhat quality cards of the set. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a rating for each of the cards between S, A, B, and C, and they will be placed somewhere in there based on my own kind of like ranking of the cards, and we'll sort of go over them as we place them in these rankings. Before we get into it, let me explain the tiers. So S tier is basically for the cards that are either generically going to be used in a lot of different decks and are just like super amazing generics, or they're decks that basically like save the deck. So they're essentially so good that they completely like up the power level of a deck and completely changed it. Then we are going to have a couple of those in this set. A tier is basically good cards, but they only function in one specific deck, or they're just generally good support for a certain deck in general, or they're just like good boss units, but not necessarily like meta breaking ones that are introduced in the set. And then B tier is really the average stuff. Like this card is probably going to be played because it's designed for a specific deck kind of tier. And then C is the niche commons that probably won't be played, but they have something going for them that is enough to be worth talking about. But these probably won't see any play unless of like really niche scenarios. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Starting off for Dragon Empire, in S rank, we have nothing. However, in A rank, we're going to start off with the Krashuna. Krashuna is a grade 1 who says when she's placed on rear, you do one of the following. First effect lets you CB1 to search your deck for a set order and add it to your hand. The second one says you can Soul Blast 1 and search your deck or drop for a set order. And if you have 2 or more with the same name that are in the order zone, you add it to your hand. And if you search your deck, you shuffle your deck. And then the second effect is when this attacks or boosts, if you have a set order in your order zone, then it gets plus 2k if your opponent's grade 3 or greater. And if you have 2 of the same name set order in your order zone, it gets another plus 5k. So this card is designed for Zed-lands, but it technically is generic. So if there's ever another set order based deck in Dragon Empire in the future, then this will of course be very, very important for that, and I wouldn't put it past them. I think we've had this happen before where they kind of like design a card that's technically meant to be used for one deck but then turns out to be generically amazing, and so I would definitely pick this up early, especially if you play the Japanese format, where maybe by the time the English set comes out for this, there's already some deck revealed that uses a Dragon Empire set order engine or something. So being able to pinpoint search, especially if you play multiple of the same name for like Soul Blast 1, is really, really good. So for that, it gets an A ranking. And the other card that for me gets an A ranking from Dragon Empire is the Zamupadoru. Zamupadoru is the Buff Saga grade 1. This is basically a Shenri that only works from grade 3 onwards. So it says back row once per turn. When the other rear guard in the same column as this stands by a card's effect, this also stands. And if your Vanguard is Buff Saga, then this gets plus 5k for the turn. The second effect is after it boosts, if your Vanguard is equipped with 2 or more arms, you put this assault to draw 1. So unlike Shenri, this doesn't get to use this effect on turn 1 or 2, but what's kind of crazy is that the stand part is actually not Buff Saga related. So in something like Sibylt, you can actually use this because Sibylt's grade 1 restander needs to see something in the mind pollution state to restand, whereas this just needs to see something stand. So it's actually useful in Sibylt, which is pretty crazy to think about. So this card, obviously, I think you don't replace Shenri with it. I think you play it on top of Shenri, because Shenri gives you the early game draw power to help you find your parts and whatnot, and also just have a good 13k booster, whereas this only works with Yugmashad, which of course you're not going to be playing every single turn, and the in-soul effect is really, really good because it builds soul while drawing a card, but I don't think this will be a 4 of. I feel like it's going to be like a 2 or a 3 of, but it is a very good card, and the fact that it has like general applicability outside of Buff Saga is also quite strong. In B, we're going to have Dina Parada. This is the grade 3 boss unit, of course, for Dragon Empire in this set. It lets you Soul Blast 1, look at top 5, call a grade 2 or lower unit card to rear and shuffle your deck. So a very generic effect, which of course the better generic grade 2s we get, the better this gets. And when he attacks, he retires 2 or more up to 5 of your rear guards, and then does effects based on how much you retire. If you did the minimum of 2, then he gets plus 5k for each one that you retired for that battle. And then if you retired 3 or more, then he gets an extra drive. So you can also do this going first, which is quite strong. And then if you retired 4 or more, then If your opponent's grade 3 or greater, then when your opponent would guard from hand against him, they have to guard with 3 cards or more at the same time. So just doing 3 feels like it's going to be pretty decent, and you're going to get basically triple drive and plus 15k to the Vanguard. Even going first is quite strong. Considering the Soul Boss 1 to plus, it's pretty decent. The problem is this deck has like very little support in this set, and it feels like that's really all it has going for itself. And even like the official deck list was basically using this with Varga, because this deck uses Shura, because you can use Shura's effect with it. But overall, I'm not very impressed. Like when you have the quality of things like Bafsagara and Virgila, this releasing and being a secret rare in this set too really doesn't feel like it's really worthy of that high of a rating. The Spruce Cutter Dragon is the next one. This is the support grade 2. It says that as long as you don't have any other rear guards while your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, this cannot be retired by your opponent's card effects. It cannot be selected by your opponent's card effects either. So it has like super resist, which is pretty cool. And when he attacks, if your Vanguard is the Venatior name, then as long as you don't have another rearguard with the same name as this guy, you can counterblast 1 to call him when he would be retired by your Venatior Vanguard's ability. And then the second effect is when he attacks, if your Vanguard is a Venatior name grade 3 or greater, then he gets plus 5k power. And his other effect is when he's retired by your grade 3 or greater Vanguard's ability. If you don't have him on board already, then you counterblast 1 to call him back on the board. And if your Vanguard is a Venatior, then for every one of your open rearguard circles, he gets plus 5k for the turn. So he's basically like a Shura for this deck that gets really strong, which is pretty nice, and he has resist. The only issue is that with Shura, you can actually do something with her early game. She can get her plus 5k even on turn 2, which helps you aggro. This deck feels like it wants to aggro, but doesn't really have the tools for it. So for me, this card also kind of goes in B tier. Then we have Indomitable Axe Dragon. This is a Zedland support grade 2 double rare that says in drop, if you have a grade 3 or greater Zedland's Vanguard and you have the like order of the deck in the order zone, when if it's selected, you can Energy Blast 3 to call this back. So it's basically a combine rusher. And then once per turn, if your set order has been chosen this turn by an effect, if you have a Zedlands grade 3 or greater Vanguard, you can choose it to give it plus 5k power. So this gives you Zedlands plus 5k for the turn, which means that it also applies for its restand, which is also pretty good. So overall, I feel like this card does good things in the deck, but it doesn't really go past that. So I feel like it kind of like places somewhere in the B tier there. And then Thruston, I would also put in B tier. This is the Eugene support. So he says that when he's placed by an ability from deck by your Vanguard's ability specifically, Energy Blast 3 to choose the opponent's rearguard and bind it. So it gives good removal, but it cannot even work when you place this from hand, which is quite unfortunate. So it literally has to be called from Eugene's effect, which is, I don't know, if you draw it early, like what are you doing with it kind of thing. Start of battle phase though, it does say if one of your opponent's rearguards have been retired by your Eugene Vanguard's ability, you can Soul Boss 1 to choose a rested rearguard, and then you stand that and this, and then they both get plus 5k. So that part is what you can do if you have to call this from hand. It's kind of okay, I guess. It gives you a little bit of power. I feel like it's an okay form of support for Eugene, but definitely nothing to write home about. And then in C tier, I put Raiden Shaft Dragon. This is a Alkalivra support. It gets plus 10k when selected by your Alkalivra with its overcharge ability. And after it attacks, it retires itself to give your Vanguard the effect that when it attacks, you can choose one of your overcharged rear guards and give it plus 5k for the turn. Now, this doesn't really read so good because you already have plus 10k gaining rear guards in this deck, and you already have really good grade 2s in the first place. You literally got a promo in the shop tournament promo just now that, you know, it's also like taking up space. So you don't really have space for this card, I feel like. So it's not necessarily a horrible card, but it's just in this deck's context, it's really not that worth it. And then the final card for the C tier is Rakuhin. This is a grade 1 that is the Senyo. This is like the budget archetype that was introduced a set or two ago. She basically says in back row, once per turn, when another Senyo in the same column as her stands, then she also stands. So the grade 2 basically, like, that's the generic package that gives a 4th attack to decks that don't have a 4th attack. So this way she restands a whole column. So I feel like it's cool that they supported that archetype, so I thought I would just include that in here too. So overall, not that much for Dragon Empire that I think is really worth it. A lot of their commons are really bad, or just like they're kind of, you know, stuff that's part of a red line, so you can kind of just like put that together with the red line for the Dina Parada. So overall, it does feel like Dragon Empire is the worst in this set, so I'd give it like a 2 out of 5. Moving on to Dark States. This is of course the nation that is carried by Drajul being the face of the set. And in S, we do have one card that I want to dedicate to S tier, and that is Tickdown Dragon. Tickdown Dragon is a grade 1 that was revealed at the very beginning of the reveals of this set, and it is a support for Liel Odium. So everyone kind of forgot about that because Liel Draconis is in this set. Even I forgot about it because I was buying Liel FFRs and silver rares, and then I forgot to buy the silver rare of this guy. But he says when he's called from hand, you reveal Liel from your right deck Or if your Liel is your Vanguard, you Energy Blast 3 and do one of the following. Either you look at top 7 for a grade 3 that isn't regular piece and add it to your hand, or you choose the Distorted Bane order that's face up in your damage zone and you add it to your hand and then put the top card of your deck into your damage. Then the second effect is, after it boosts your Liel Vanguard, if you have 4 or more gauge, you can put this to soul to countercharge 1. So to me, this feels really, really good support for Liel. I mean, it just has so much going for it because it gives you a really good countercharger that only works from turn 4 onwards, but I think that's also fine. It only works behind the Vanguard too, so that, you know, this doesn't get much power as a booster, but it does something very, very important in being able to countercharge and provide soul at the same time, which can be good for paying that extra cost for the triple drive and whatnot. But most importantly, it's the Energy Blast 3 ability, being able to top 7 for either a Persona Ride or Anachronous or Distorted Bane. Those are all really good targets. I think you still will play the Rester because being able to pinpoint play a Distorted Bane is better than top 7 and whiffing it. But the fact that this can search any grade 3 will really help with the deck thin of this deck, which is something that it really likes because that means that the triple drives from turn 3 onwards will have a higher hit rate because of the deck thin too. And the fact that they kind of incorporated multiple cards into one effect, I think is also one of the really strong parts of this card too. Next, in A tier, we do have Drejeweled Magnus together with his ride line in particular. Drejeweled Magnus has been definitely met with some kind of criticism here and there, being not as strong as people expected. People expected it to be kind of like Buff Sagara tier of a grade 3 remake, and it kind of ended up being more like a Magnolia tier of a grade 3 remake. So start of the ride phase, he puts 2 cards from your drop to your soul, which means that on the turn you ride this, you'd skip that part because you're already past the start of the ride phase. But start of the battle phase, if you have a Drejeweled in your soul, then for that turn your front row gets plus 5k. So this is pretty good because if you high roll this off of a soul charge somewhere, then you will be able to actually activate this. And when he attacks the Vanguard, you Soul Blast 4 different grade cards to choose your opponent's Vanguard and set its power to 0. So until now, grade 3 Drejeweled always set it to 1. Now you get to 0. That is basically a 5k increase of your power because now suddenly they can't guard for like, you know, like if you're swinging with a 10k, they'd be able to guard with 10k shield because it'd be 10k and 1. But now if you swing with a 10k to a 0, they have to guard with a 15 because otherwise it's going to be 10 to 10 and it still goes through. So the 0 is actually quite important. But if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, this also gets a crit, just like that. And if it gained the crit, and you have 4 more damage or your Persona row this turn, you can choose one of your, I think, Jewel Dragon rear guards. There's very few of these that you can target, but you choose it, and for that turn you give it the effect that when that rear guard attacks once per turn, you can discard 1 to set this card's drive to 1 and allow it to perform a drive check. And of course, there is a card in the set that lets you do twin drive as well, even though it sets its drive to 1. I think Magnus as a card is not great because I do think that the grade 4 Drejeweled Ignis is still better because it gives you retire, it gives you even bigger front row buff, and it gives you even more recycling of stuff from your soul, and it doesn't need you to essentially have to like be discarding cards for drive checks and whatnot. You can just do triple drive with the grade 4 instead. But I think for the ride deck, this is still quite good because of the fact that if you can get the like grade 4 Drejeweled even in the soul early, because you'd have a Persona Ride in the deck, right? If you can get the grade 4 Drejeweled in the soul early, you get the plus 5k buff, and the 0 power is also very important. And in this ranking, I also want to put the ride line together too, because it's actually very good. The grade 1 says when you ride the grade 2 over it, you look at top 5, choose 2 different grades and put them to soul and shuffle your deck. So the old one called itself out and like went back in the soul, so it gave you some aggro, but this one just helps set up your soul now, which is also quite nice. The grade 2 now says that when you ride a Drejeweled grade 3 over it, he soul charges 1, and as long as you have the grade 1 of the ride line in the soul, he draws you 1 no matter what. Before that, he had to like hit basically for the draw, but now doesn't care about that. And then he also has a rear guard effect, but he just gates 5k power if you have a Magnus Vanguard, but that's not really going to be happening too much. But I think just the card draw being confirmed, and then also like getting a bit more deck thinning early with the soul charge from the grade 1, I think does make this ride line overall quite good, even if you just play it with the grade 4. And then the card that goes with it is of course the Gyoru Doraru. So I'm going to be kind and put this in A as well. I do think that it's not necessarily a bad card because it does do a lot. When you guard with it, you can reveal Drejeweled in your ride deck, or if your Vanguard is Drejeweled, he's a 5k shield as a grade 3. That's already okay. And if your Vanguard is a Drejeweled, he gets the remaining abilities that when he's called during main phase on rear from anywhere, can also be from the soul, you may soul charge 1 and then Energy Blast 3 to choose a different name card that is grade 3 or lower from your soul and call it. So this basically means that you're able to make a board from him for 3 energy. This does clash with your energy use with the Lith Agur that came out in the previous set. So you're gonna have to kind of think about how you want to use that energy. So early game, that's all he's doing. He's just going to be calling out something from Soul and be a 5k shield at the same time. However, he is a Jewel Dragon guy, so he has another effect that's once per turn. When he attacks a grade 3 or greater, if your damage is 4 or more, his drive becomes 2. So this does not work if you Persona Road clause, like the if you Persona Road or if you are 4 damage or more clause is only on the Magnus. This guy, he only gets a twin drive when you're at 4, so your opponent can counterplay it. So I think his main strength is really the board building, but the problem is that Rejeweled already had a board building card that's tied to the grade 4 engine. So honestly, I don't rate this guy that high myself, but it feels like he has enough going for himself that I can put him in A, because I feel like if I put him in B objectively, might get a little bit of slack over here. Moving over to B though, Bombing Juggler definitely goes in B. This is a support card for Blagmire, and he basically says that if you have 4 or more face down bind, his cost goes down by EB2, and his effect is when he attacks, if your Vanguard's a Blagmire grade 3 or greater, EB2, and for that battle he gets plus 10k, and at the end of the battle he goes to Soul. When he goes to Soul by a card effect, if your Vanguard's a Blagmire grade 3 or greater, he can bind himself face down, choose one of your rear guards, give it plus 5k power, and if your bind zone is 8 or more, give that rear guard 10k power instead. This is a grade 3, so the first thought that everyone had when they saw this was like, well, the Gear Colossus can draw me a card. This literally is a worse version of that card. And that is correct, but you can kind of use them both together. And the one thing that opens up is that if you really dedicate to playing a bunch of these grade 3s that work off of going to Soul to give you a bonus effect and they self-bind face down, that can kind of give you the option to build up the bind zone a little bit faster, but you're kind of praying to random Soul charge. And the problem is that this needs you to be on Blagmire to random Soul Charge and go to bind. So you'd have to like ride the Blagmire, do your Soul Charges, hit this or the Colossus a bunch of times, and only then can you like get up to like, you know, 6 or 8 bind like on your grade 3 swing on turn 3. I don't really think it's worth to play into that kind of game plan. I think it's better to play a more early game focused build with things like Forward Revaltus. So I don't rate this card very highly, and I don't think it's really good support for Blagmire either. Then we have Daoji. He's a grade 1 that's when called from hand to rear, Soul charges 1, and if your Vanguard's a Barra Magnus, he gets plus 5k, and after he boosts, if your Vanguard's Barra Magnus, then if you didn't countercharge this turn, you put the column this guy is in into the Soul to countercharge 1. So this builds Soul, which is quite good, and it also countercharges, which means that it's pretty easy to reuse with Barra Magnus's effect, and it overall feels like a pretty good support. That being said, Barra Magnus already had access to countercharge, so it's not necessarily the most sought after, but maybe this being tied to a grade 1 13k body that Soul charges might make it a little bit better to hit those goals. Then Omonail will also rank in at B. This is a grade 1 Greedon support that when placed on rear lets you look at top 5 of your deck if your Vanguard is a Greedon or a Desire Devil and find a grade 3 that is not a Regulus piece and add it to your hand. And if you did, you choose a card from hand to Soul. And when this is put from rear to Soul by your Greedon's effect, you can choose a card from drop to put it to Soul as well. So very good Soul building card. I feel like this being a grade 1 also without like any cost is kind of nice, because the top 5 put one to hand and then put something to Soul isn't too bad in this deck because it actually cares about having stuff in Soul, so this can help you build the Soul a little bit while also finding your masks or the Greedon masks form itself. And then putting something from drop to Soul is also pretty decent, I think, too, considering that it doesn't have any extra cost. And then the final card I'll put in B is the Kandaranu. So this card is support for Belphomedes, which is not necessarily a good grade 3 boss unit by any means, but this card, what it says is really good. It's a grade 2 that treats itself as a grade 3 in Rear, Guardian, and Soul if your Vanguard is Belphomedes, and it gets plus 5k on both players' turns too, which is good because Belphomedes needs to put grade 3 rears into Soul for its cost, and it cares about how many grade 3s are in the Soul for its effect. And so this guy says that when he's put from rear to Soul by Belphomedes' effect, he chooses a grade 3 from drop, puts that to Soul as well, and lets you EB3 to draw one, and then choose a unit from your hand and call it to an empty rearguard circle, and then you can choose a back row grade 3 that is in the same column as that unit and stand it. So this one card does a lot for a deck that isn't good. So the deck itself is not good, but this one card does so many things that it feels bad not to put it in at least B. So good congrats, I guess, to all 2 Belphomedes players. And then moving on to C, this is like the kind of like considerable cards. We have Urudia. This card is a grade 2 that says when she is placed by a card effect on rearguard circle, if your Vanguard's a Gear Dragon, your opponent's grade 3 or greater, Canomas 1 and choose a Dark States normal unit in your bind zone and put it to the bot deck to choose herself and give her plus 5k power for each grade of the card you put by this effect. So if you put a grade 3 from your bind zone to the bot deck, she'll get plus 15k. I don't think paying CB for this is worth it, but for now, only Jet and I guess time stamping can use this. Like, this card doesn't necessarily feel good, but I guess combined with like Crest and Fate Rider and her own power, it's like you do technically get a lot of power on her. So if there's a way to slap a guard restrict onto this could make some interesting OTK plays perhaps. Then Sonic Stalker will also go in here. She's a grade 2 that in the Soul says start of battle phase, if your Vanguard is Barrow Magnus, put a card from hand to Soul to call her out and give her plus 5k for the turn. This is not too bad because it lets you kind of trade things that are kind of like, you know, bricks in hand or like an extra order or like a grade 3 you don't need into the Soul to call out a grade 2 with shield value that's going to be a 15k attacker. Not too bad, especially if you like randomly soul charge this. I feel like it's kind of okay. And then the final card is the Gear Elephant. This card's also kind of interesting where it's a grade 1 that says when placed during the battle phase on rear, you can look at the top card of your deck and put it on top of the deck or to Soul. So there's quite a few ways to call stuff out during battle phase. I mean, like literally again in Jet, you can call this out and then be able to like stack the top card or generate yourself a Soul for costs. So I feel like in Jet, this is like not necessarily that good, but it's kind of considerable, and anything else that calls stuff during battle phase either from Soul or from deck can also potentially up their chances of triggers. Would have liked this guy to gain some other effect on top of that, but we all know that Vanguard commons don't do that much these days. So overall, Dark States feels pretty average. Like Jeweled Radline is okay, Takedown Dragon is of course very good, so I don't think it necessarily deserves that high of a ranking overall. It feels like they support a bunch of different decks, but didn't necessarily give them the most game-breaking support either. So I feel like Dark States this time around gets just about a 3 out of 5. Moving on to the best nation in the set, Brandt Gate is eating so good this time around. It is crazy. They literally gave us some of the best cards ever in a very long time. So first things first, in S, we have 2 cards this time around, and the first one is without a doubt Magnetus. This thing is insane. I can't believe the Brandt Gate playset was on pre-order for like 5,000-6,000 yen before this came out. Now just 4 copies of Magnetus goes for that much, and you still have more good cards in this set. Magnetus is literally Tith's fault for Brandt Gate at long last. He says, when he's placed on rear outside of by a unit card's ability, which means that set orders do proc his effect. If this turn you set an order, then Soul Blast 1, you are able to look at the top 5 cards of your deck and choose a card that is equal to or lower grade than your Vanguard. If it's a unit card, call it to rear. If it's a set order, add it to your hand. So this already very good. Second effect is when he attacks a grade 3 or greater, if you have a set order in your order zone, he gets plus 5k, and if your Vanguard is a kaiju or a monster, then he gets plus 10k on top. So this basically means that you can play this in Eva on turn 2, set your order that you searched, call this Soul Blast 1, call out your freaking Obscudate, call out your Imigrar, find yourself whatever you need. It's so good. This also, of course, unfortunately works really well in Ela de Glema, so this helps you deck thin and find your 1 copy of the Moe Flash and whatnot. And also in Archite, this will also get the plus 10k fully, while also being able to deck thin and deck search. So very, very good. Obviously, in anything that uses the Kaiju order or can call out Kaijus, this will not proc from Archite's own effect, unfortunately, but it's still going to be very, very good finding it off like Blue Research Lab in Eva. I've heard also people saying that this can be played in things like Rotovisor too, just because of course you set orders every turn. So any deck that sets orders every turn will naturally want to play this. It is so good. If you're Brandt Gate main, pick up 4 copies as fast as you can before they start to go up. They're already starting to go up pretty high, even on day 1 here in Japan, and I feel like it's only going to go higher. So this card is crazy and definitely deserves of the S tier, but there's one more card, and that is the Helgvar. Helgvar is a long-awaited support card for Vaserug that finally makes his deck really, really good. He says that, or she says, I guess, when placed on rear outside of battle phase, you reveal Vaserug from your ride deck, or if your Vanguard is Vaserug, you can do one of the following effects. First one is, look at top 5 of your deck for either a Vaserug name card or one of the Moon Orders and reveal it to your hand. Or, if this turn you Persona Road, you can Energy Blast 3 in order to search your deck for a Moon Order and add it to your hand. So early game, if you don't have any Persona Rides or Moon Orders in hand, this can help you search it. It's only top 5, so there's a chance you miss it, but the good thing is that there's no cost for the top 5, so you don't have to pay energy for that one. The best part of this card, though, is that after it boosts, if your Vanguard is Vaserug, you can put it to Soul to countercharge 1. So it's literally just Bubble Mine, but the important part is that this is a Mythisk, which means that You can call this, you can search this, you can recycle this. You can do everything with this card and be able to countercharge multiple times. And being able to countercharge consistently while recycling it means that you can pay counterblast for all your effects now a lot more aggressively. You can use your orders now, you can use Vaserug itself more, you can use the wolf to draw more, you can use the back row attack fish more, like everything gets turned on and enabled by this one card. It's actually insane how good of a support card this basically saved this deck. Vaserug is now finally playable thanks to the third Mythisk that has finally come out. However, we do have a couple cards that do go into the A tier, I would say. First one is the Viadol Heyday. This is a support card for Impoldio. If you have System Code Exceed in your order zone, it gets the following effects. First one is when placed on rear, if you have 2 or more gauge, Soul Blast 2 to draw a card. This is already pretty nice on its own, but after the battle, it was not boosted and attacked a grade 3 or greater. If it's the first battle of the turn, counterblast 1 to stand it. So Impoldio finally got multi-attack, the deck that everyone thought would never get multi-attack and would stay as like a big drive checking tanky deck that counters Illitiglamma for, you know, important reasons. A lot of people are kind of upset that this card is not exactly very original or like inspired. It just draws you a card and gives you a restand with like a very tough restriction. But even though it's not necessarily that inspiring, it is definitely a good card. Being able to multi-attack in a deck that never had multi-attack, that has, you know, front row buffing enabled by its own Vanguard effect, is going to be pretty good. It does, however, make it that you have to swing with this first. And the whole strength of Impoldio is that you could like swing with Vanguard drive checks, swing with Vinstar drive checks, try to check OT and then kill on the last swing with all the triggers on it, right? Whereas now it's like the first attack is going to be small, and if your opponent's on 5 and they know they're going to die to the like drive checks or whatever, they'll just take it, hit defensive OT, and maybe just survive because of that. So this card definitely doesn't feel as strong as the other 2 triple rares in this set, but it's still good, so it would definitely feel weird not to put it in A tier. Next is Gravidia Barwell. This card is Yuika, actually. So she says, when placed during the main phase on rear, you reveal a Nordlinger grade 3 from your right deck, or if your Vanguard is a Nordlinger, to search your deck for a grade 2 or greater set order, or sorry, order card, and it doesn't have to be a set order, any order card, and discard it and shuffle your deck. So that's for free. No Soul Blast, no Counterblast, nothing. You get to deck thin 1. Then, after it boosts, if your Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater Nordlinger, you Soul Blast 1 and return the boosted rearguard back to your hand. So that's literally Yuika. It's literally just Yuika for Gravidia, which feels pretty good. There's nothing off the top of my head that I'm like, oh, this is a crazy good on-place effect, but you don't have to necessarily bounce back Nordlinger cards. You can bounce back everything. So you can technically play a generic. You can play the new freaking Kaiju generic and then bounce that back too, although that's going to use a lot of soul. So I feel like Yuika being given to a deck that isn't lyrical out of nowhere feels kind of good to me. So that's something going to go in A tier, and I want to see Gravidia explored a little bit after this card too. Then in B tier, we have the new Rotovisor Shenheit. This thing is not too bad, honestly. It says if you have a Rotovisor grade 3 or greater Vanguard, then this gets grade +1 and the following effects. When placed on rear, choose an opponent's column. For that turn, when this unit would attack your opponent's Vanguard, it battles your opponent's Vanguard and the chosen rearguard circle at the same time. And if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, then for that turn, this unit gets +5k power. So that's also basically a Estation counter, which is kind of funny. But on top of that, his second effect says, all of the Rotovisor units in the same column as him get boost. Now, this gives boost to the grade 3 Rotovisor triple rare from a few sets back. And that grade 3 was a triple rare in set 5. And he basically says EB3 to make your Vanguard's ability cost 1 CB less. And he says that when he stood by your Vanguard's effect, you Soul Blast 1 to stand any number of arenas in your order zone. If you stood 3 or more, you can CB1, and then all rearguards in the same column as him get +10k. That effect doesn't say anything about being in the front row, so he can be boosting while doing that effect, which is also pretty good. So overall, Rotovisor really got a pretty decent double rare, I'd say. Too bad the deck itself is not very good, but this does deserve to be at least in B tier. Then Exashim is the double rare for Orphis in this set. She's a grade 2 that says in drop during your battle phase when this unit, or your unit, sorry, is retired from rearguard circle. If your Vanguard is an Orphis grade 3 or greater, Energy Blast 2 and bind this to choose the retired unit and add it back to your hand. So I heard from Orphis players that recently Thumbarino has been used again, and technically this does let you get back the Thumbarino and reuse it for just 2 energy, which is pretty good. You can keep making 38k unguardable drawing columns, which is pretty nice. So for that reason, she sounds like she has a place in Orphist. I'm just not sure what it necessarily looks like. So that's also pretty good synergy, I guess, with the new order making you Shadow Army tokens early, if I remember correctly. I literally just like bought the promos and didn't play the deck yet. Oh, never mind. It draws you a card when set and then makes a token on turn 3. Right. So it does make a token, I was right. And then the final card for B tier is the new Moon Order. So this card says you can play it from drop if your Vanguard is a Vaserug and your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater. You bind it, and then you choose your Vanguard, and for that turn it gets the effect that all of your Mythisk rearguards get plus 5k power. So it's basically the golden order that we got in set 7, but without the CB and 5k less. So that one gave plus 10k to everything called that turn. This one gives plus 5k to all your Mythisks, even if they weren't called that turn, but it doesn't cost CB either. So I feel like this will be played as like a 1 or a 2 of, but the gold one definitely, especially with the new CB usage that you have now with thanks to the new grade 1, definitely going to be using that effect quite a lot now, I think. And sorry, one more card in B tier is the Noshime Occasion. This is a Vanguard support. Grade 1 in drop says if you didn't play a tactics card in your order zone this turn, you can bind this from drop to search your hand or drop for a tactics and put it to the order zone, and if you put from hand, you draw one. So it's kind of good that it lets you get drop recursion, which is, I think, quite nice. And this specifically says that if your card ability hasn't put a card in your order zone, which means that if you played one from hand, you can then use this to put another one. So you get to cheat out a bunch of tactics into your order zone with this, and it also lets you cycle a card from hand if you put from hand. So feels like a pretty good card, especially because it's a rare for Vanguard. Definitely better than the double rare. Speaking of which, I guess let's go into C tier, and the Meishi Distance definitely goes in C tier. This is the double rare support for Vanguard. Her first effect says if your Vanguard is a blue Death Star, you EB3 to look at top 5 for a tactics card or a grade 3 that is in the regular space and add it to your hand and shuffle your deck. So you see the triple rare Vaserug support card lets you look at top 5 without paying EB3. The double rare one pays EB3 first and then whiffs the top 5 for you, which is kind of crazy. There's not that many targets in the deck for top 5 to be that consistent, so that's already a bit of a sus point. But the other one is that if your Vanguard is a blue Death Star, once per turn you can Soul Boss 1 to choose from your drop a grade equal to or lower than your Vanguard that is a blue Death Star pilot and call it to the same column as this unit. And for that turn, it says at the end of the turn that rearguard will retire. Overall, there's just not that many good targets for this to call out, and it just basically then shoots it at the end too. So it feels like I don't really know what this card's trying to do. It feels like maybe we're gonna get some really crazy blue Death Star pilot down the line and this card will shoot up and become super stonks, but based on the current card pool, this card is really not that great. Then I'll put Technomech in here. She's a grade 2 that says when she's retired from rearguard circle during your battle phase, if this turn you sent 2 or more set orders from your order zone to the drop, you can Energy Blast 3 to choose a back row rearguard and stand it, but that turn it cannot attack. So this can technically be used with the Gravidia grade 1 we introduced, where you sack your meteors in order to restand the grade 1, and then that lets you use Yuika's effect twice. But does Gravidia have battle phase call to like overcall this and then bounce whatever like called again? Otherwise, I guess Orphist also can technically restand a token in the back row early after this is called over, but doesn't sound that good, but it does have like some random applicability, so I wanted to include it in the list regardless, just because of that. Then Bad Mortar, this funny monster common, says when he attacks a Vanguard, if your order zone has 3 or more set orders, you Energy Blast 3, and you choose an opponent's rearguard in the same column as this unit, and until the end of your opponent's next turn, it cannot intercept and does not stand in the stand phase, which is kind of an interesting way to, you know, EB3 to stun something. Doesn't sound too bad. It being a kaiju as well means that this can technically be used in Arcade, I suppose. Then Modifying a Ranger is a grade 1 that says back row once per turn. When a rearguard in the same column as this unit stands by a card ability, you can Energy Blast 3 to stand this as well. So something that stands on top of a stand feels like it can be something that can be used in combos. So I think this card is not necessarily super bad. And finally, we have the Realid Squeak. So this guy says in drop, when your Dishar Rockhopper is placed on rear, EB3 to revive this behind it. So I kind of like that they have 2 matching arts together, basically. It's not necessarily something good, but I kind of like the concept, so points for that. Overall though, Brandt Gate this time got an insane generic, got multiple like archetypes with really good support, some of which are completely saved essentially. So to me, I think Brandt Gate is the best in the set. I think it gets an easy 5 out of 5. Slight bias maybe, I am a Brandt Gate main. Moving on to the nation that definitely was the most expected, I guess, to do well in this set, that is Keter. Keter overall got a lot of good cards, and the first one that I very happily bought a whole FFR of, there you go, you get to see her. It is Liel. She's gonna go in S tier. That might surprise some of you, but I do think she has what it takes to be a meta threat. Her effect is Energy Blast 4, it's quite a lot, and choose a normal unit from your drop or rear and bind it. And then you discard one, not as a cost, but as an effect, and for that turn she gets +1 drive. So what does that mean? That means that if your hand is empty and you try to discard one, you can't, but you still get the drive, because it's not a cost. The cost is to bind something and pay EB4. So that means that if your hand is empty, you still get to do the effect, which is quite nice. The second effect is when she attacks, counterblast 1, choose a rearguard and bind it, and then search your deck for a card with the same name as a card in your bind zone and call it. This is a huge upgrade, because before Liel had to call the thing that she bound for the cost. So now she can bind whatever she wants in the main phase and then call that thing without necessarily caring about what she bound for her on attack effect. And then finally, her divine skill also got an upgrade. It says now at the end of battle that she attacked, if your opponent's grade 3 or greater, you can choose a Liel named card in your drop or soul and write it as stand, and then if you did, you turn that card's drive into 1. So this is really good, because if you didn't manage to get the Liel into drop for the bonus effect, or if you just persona road and you don't want to like discard the other Liel, you can just rewrite from soul and you're done, right? You still get your extra Vanguard attack, you get to use the on attack effect again too. So overall, the biggest weakness of this card is that she doesn't get any power in the Vanguard circle. Your rears are pretty big, you have Gabwelius, you have Sequence Wizard, you have so many good cards from before, you have a Liel Searcher, Gabwelius Searcher, like so many good little cards have come out over time for Liel, and now you finally have a good grade 3 boss unit that can make use of all of them. What's more is that she got a good support card, which I'll put in A tier in Almov. This card says when you call her on rear, you can reveal Liel from your right deck, or if your Vanguard is Liel, she energy charges 1, so that makes using the EB4 a little bit less awkward. And after the battle that she attacked, if your Vanguard is Liel, if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you put her to soul, and for that turn, you, the player, get the effect that all your front row rear guards get +5k. So it doesn't resolve the problem of Liel herself not having too much power, but, however, it does make all your rear guards swing for more, and it also generates some energy as well to make that EB4 less awkward. Because Liel uses EB4, it does make using things like Biscotti and whatnot pretty difficult in this deck, so you don't really get to afford to use energy cards much, or even like the unique skill either, which is quite sad. But this card, like, it provides soul. Soul is literally never a problem in this deck because of Sequence Wizard now as well, because you can technically bind from rear twice. Like, you can bind once for main effect, bind once for the on attack effect, technically 3 times if you use divine skill in the same turn too. And then this girl also provides soul, so she feels like she kind of slots into A. I've seen some lists that play her and some that don't. Of course, you still want to make space for Sargon and whatnot, but I do think this card is quite good. However, Liel is not the only deck that got support in this set. Bastion got some really good stuff. Starting with, in A tier, we have the Azelel. When placed on rear outside of battle phase, you can almost 1 Soul Blast 1, choose a grade 3 from hand and call it to rear, and if you did, draw 2. Literally a 2025 version of Alden from 2021? 2022? 2021, right? Yeah, it's already been 4 years, goddamn. Then our other effect is if you have a Bastion or Alden Vanguard, she on rearguard or Guardian Circle gets Intercept and +5k power and +5k shield on both players' turns. So literally ticks all the boxes, right? She draws you 2 cards for CB1 Soul Blast 1. She's an intercepting 5k, that's also an 18k attacker that can get buffed even more, right, by all of your Aldens. So overall, very good card. I think this is definitely a really good support for Mr. Bastion himself specifically. And then Baransi will also go in A tier for me. He's a grade 2, also a support for Bastion. In rear, hand, and trigger zone, if your Vanguard is a Bastion, this becomes a grade +1, so it's a grade 3, and it carries boost as well, so it boosts a 10k. And when you call it, you reveal Bastion in your right deck, or if it's on your Vanguard circle, to counterblast 1, look at top 5, find a grade 3 or greater that's in a Regulus piece, add it to your hand, and if you didn't add anything, you countercharge 1. So at least this gives you a clause for if you whiff it, but of course in Bastion, your whole deck is grade 3, so at the very least, you're not likely to whiff this. So I do feel like both of the Bastion cards are actually pretty good support. Next in B tier, we have the Impervious Dragon. This is a Liel support that says when discarded from hand or put on Guardian Circle, or retired from Guardian Circle, sorry. If your Vanguard is a Liel grade 3 or greater, this goes to Soul instead. You may put it to Soul. And if your bind zone has a card in it, then this gets +5k power, +5k shield as well. kind of cool is that if you discard this for PG cost during your opponent's turn, it will also go to Soul. So literally Soul is never going to be an issue again for Liel, which is very nice because of cards like this. Although I'm not sure if you'll have space to play this card. That's why this one is in B tier. Then Impervious Dragon will also go in B tier. This is a Rezel support that when put on Guardian or Rearguard circle, you can reveal a Rezel in your right deck, or if your Vanguard is Rezel, to give him one of the following effects, depending on which circle he's on. If it's Rearguard, he gets plus 5k for that turn, but if he was played by Rezel's effect, then he gets plus 10k instead. So another solid attacker, I guess, next to your Nilberis. But when he guards, he gets plus 5k shield, but if he intercepted, he gets plus 10k shield. So either a 10k or a 15k shield, which is also kind of solid. I feel like maybe you could use this like a one of or something, but your front row is kind of already busy in Brazil because you already have Gabuelius as well as the bird. So, and when you're not calling the bird, you're calling Nilberis. So I don't really know if you would ever really call this guy, like what timings you would use him in. So while his effect is decent, I feel like the Rezal deck is just a little bit spoiled right now. And then finally we have Vilgawon. This is support for the Dog Breeder deck. Grade 1 that when played on rear, if your Vanguard is a High Dog Breeder, then you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck to find a High Dog Breeder unit and then reveal it, add it to your hand, shuffle your deck, and if you did, you put a card from hand to soul. This deck I feel like doesn't care about generating the soul as much, so you don't get a raw plus. This is literally just a deck thin of 1. And then otherwise he gets plus 5k shield if you have a Dog Breeder Vanguard, and if your opponent's grade 3 or greater, he gets plus 5k power on his own too. 13k booster in the back row is pretty decent, especially, I mean, this also being a 10k shield is also pretty cool. So it feels like it's decent support, but nothing too crazy. The best dog is still going to be Sargawon for the longest time, and these new dogs are not really replacing him either. And then for C tier, I just have 2 cards I want to put in here. One of them is the Eagle. This is the card for Liel that says when this is bound during your turn, if your Vanguard is Liel, then you can choose a non-sentinel card from your drop that is grade 1 or greater and put it back to the bottom of the deck. So it just kind of basically gives you some recycling ability. And then the other common that I'd also put in C tier is the Neigawon. When this is placed on rear, if you have a Dog Breeder rear guard, you can choose it until the end of your opponent's next turn. It cannot be attacked by your opponent's rear guards, which is kind of interesting. We haven't had one of those effects in quite a long time in Vanguard, and I feel like it's not necessarily a good form of resist, but it is a form of resist. So if it gains some power, I feel like it might even be considered. But for now, it just gets a little like C tier shout out, and that's about it. So overall, Keter, I do think that Bastion and Liel are eating really good in this set. The other rad lines maybe not so much. So I think also based on the fact that when we ranked one thing in S tier in this nation, I think we're going to give it a 4 out of 5 ranking. Next, we have Stoicheia. Not the last nation this time. We do have Lyrical after this, and we do have a card in S tier, and this one maybe not everyone will agree on, but I do think Nanaclear has potential. Nanaclear is the card used by Duka, and she says that during your turn, if you have 3 or more one who arrived at Paradise rearguards, she turns your world into a stray garden, so like Orphis, she uses worlds, and gets triple drive. So literally, put 3 beer guards on the board, she'll have triple drive even going first, which is very easy to achieve. And then you can energy blast 3 once per turn, look at top 5, choose 1. If it's a unit card, call it, and if it's the specific order card she has, the flower open rear guard, not rear guard, the order card, then you can add it to your hand and then shuffle your deck. And then you can choose one of your one who arrived at Paradise rear guards, and if you called it, you can give it plus 5k for the turn. And then she says when she attacks, she can almost want to stand a rear guard. So there's a lot of good things going for her as a grade 3 boss unit. She has triple drive, she stands a rear guard, so she gives you 4 attacks, and she deck thins for either a rear or the order. So to me, it sounds like this deck is really good going first, because she can, immediately get her triple drive going first. She powers up your rears, she calls a rear, she also, gives you 4 attacks going first, which is just very, very strong. Her order's English name, I think it's like Keido Mire Force. So I guess we might as well talk about it immediately, because I am putting this in A tier. This card is very good. This order itself is actually very strong. It says if your Vanguard is Nanaclear, you can use one of the following effects. Either choose a one who arrived at Paradise from your drop and call it to rear, or choose one of your one who arrived at Paradise rear guards, and for that turn it gets the effect that when it's stood by a card effect, or sorry, when it's stood, period, when it's stood, if your world is Stray Garden, for that turn it gets a crit and plus 5k. So the plus 5k happens before it stood too. The +1 crit happens after it stood. So again, you can use this on going first, which is very, very strong. So you can do 4 attacks going first with an extra crit and the extra power as well. But then what I think is one of her best parts is the second, or not the effect of the order, but her bonus effect that says when she is revealed from deck by one of your Paradise cards, you can reveal her in your hand to draw one. So if you add this from anything, this will not just add itself, but also draw you an extra card. So you're getting extra plus from it. So these two cards alone, to me, read really, really good. It's just that this archetype needs a little bit more support. And I guess while we're at it, let's talk about the ride line as well. It's just a bunch of glorps. The grade 0 is a glorp. The grade 1 is a glorp that when it's ridden over by the grade 2 glorp, it calls itself to rear and soul charges 1 and gets plus 5k if your world is a stray garden, and it has the arrived at paradise name in it, which is very important. The grade 2 glorp says when it's ridden over by a nana clear, you may call it, and if you did, you choose a card from drop, put it to soul, and if you didn't call it, you can then draw one instead. And if your world is a stray garden, this gets boost and plus 5k, so it can be in the back row too. So that's already 2 of your stray garden rear guards basically achieved from your ride line alone. So for that reason, I feel like this definitely is a good boss unit. It just needs a bit more support, and I feel like all it takes is like one more set. I wouldn't be surprised if she suddenly becomes evil either, honestly. The fact that she's drawn by Fuzichoko, you know, drew Gavril and whatnot, you can definitely do turn this happy looking fairy into an evil and angry one, and I wouldn't be too surprised. So I have high expectations. I'm looking forward to it. Then next to that in A tier, we will put the Leaves Feather Dragon. This is support for Nana Clear that says when placed outside of battle phase on rear, countermust 1, look at top 3, choose a card with equal to or lower grade than your Vanguard and reveal it. If it's a unit card, you can call it, and if it's the order we showed just now, add it to your hand and shuffle your deck. If your world is the Stray Garden, you look at top 7 instead of 3. Top 7 is a big difference, and you get to Stray Garden by having 3 of these rear guards, which means that if you have the ride line, 2 of them on board, and you call this, you've achieved it, right? That's all you need. And when this guy attacks, if your world is Stray Garden, Soul Boss 1, get plus 10k for that battle as well. So even if you're going first, that basically means that this will be a 20k. It can be 25k if called from the Vanguard effect. It can be a 30k if buffed by the order. So that means that it will then restand and be a 30k with 2 crit, which is really not that bad when you think about it. So a lot of the CB in this deck is also being used for like big plussing, and every time you reveal the order by one of these effects, then you're also getting an extra card draw. So this definitely feels like a very solid A as well. Then not Nana Clear support, but Straight Scale Dragon is also definitely an A card. This says that if you have a Argo Siren or Aqua Force Vanguard, then this gains the following effects. When placed on rear, EB3, and discard an order card from your hand to draw 2, and if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, gets plus FK for the turn. And it also says when this is attacking or when it's stood by a card effect, if your Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater for that turn, it gets plus 5k power. So all of this plus 5k gain is for the turn, which is really good in both Aqua Force, which can of course reposition your rear guards and whatnot, but in Argo Siren you can restand your rear guards, and that's also very important. So this is basically like Yugma Shot, but for those 2 decks, and I do think this card is really, really good. I was even debating putting this in S, but it's not necessarily a generic, it's only usable in those 2 decks. It is kind of life-saving support for Argo Siren, so you definitely could argue for this to be in S for sure. And the card we'll put next to it is the Gracious. This is a grade 1 with 5k power, so it's a little bit on the low side, but when this is discarded from your hand during your turn by your card effect, if your Vanguard is a Argo Siren, you can choose a different named normal unit that is not a Sentinel from your drop than this and put it to the bottom of your deck to put this card into your soul, and then choose the auto effect of your Vanguard and do the following. Either make its cost counterboss 1 less, or make its cost Soul Energy Blast 3 less. The second effect is back row rear guard circle during your turn. If your Vanguard is a grade 3 or greater Argo Siren, all of the mermaids in the same column as this unit and tier dragons get plus 5k power except for herself. So in case you don't know, Calliopeia, the Argo Siren boss, she basically says that when she attacks the Vanguard, you CB1 to choose one of the orders in your order zone and bind it, and then if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, you can Energy Blast 3 to choose another one. So you get to remove one of those costs, which is really good, and those orders basically either allow you to restand your Vanguard or allow you to choose a rear guard and stand it. So either you're standing a rear or you're standing the Vanguard, or both really. So this card letting you basically make one of those costs free is really, really good, because then that gives you more resources to use the energy for something like the Straight Scale to draw cards. So I really think these 2 cards really make Argo Sirens good this set, but there's one more card that goes in A tier for Stoicheia that's quite a lot, which is the Keter. This is a Magnolia support that says when placed from hand on rear, or in place by one of your Sylvan Horn Beast effects, so like Magnolias basically. You can Soul Boss 1 to look at top 7 for a Magnolia and then add it to your hand, so it doesn't refund it if you whiff it, but it does help you search it. But most importantly, it says if your Vanguard's a Magnolia grade 3, then your Persona Ride goes to your back row. So this effect existed before, but it was on a grade 1. And obviously it's better on a grade 2 because that just lets you push power more. And this can also be in the front row while applying that power to the back row, which I think is very strong. And I think even the search for Magnolia has gotten buffed too. I feel like it was top 5 and this one's top 7. So it's literally just like a better card than an old card for Magnolia. So I mean, it's basically a little quality of life increase. Then in B tier, unfortunately, we're going to put Granfia in here. The new Granfia literally feels like a departure from what the old Granfia wanted to do. You ride this over the old one, activate Persona Ride, and for that turn, he inherits the original effects of all the Granfia. Then he turns all your plant tokens and your Noblesse Rose tokens into Plant Gauge and puts them under the new Noblesse Rose Rossa token. And then at the end of the turn, he basically chooses the old Granfia, rides it as rest, and then if you did, you can choose one of your Noblesse Rose tokens and put this under that as a Plant Gauge. And then if you're wondering what the new Noblesse Rose does, it basically says that this does not move to other circles, and if your Vanguard is a Granfia, this is treated as Noblesse Rose and gets the following effects. Whenever you would play a plant token, you can instead put it to this as Plant Gauge, and for each gauge it has, it gets plus 5k power. And whenever you would retire rearguards as a cost, if it is a plant token rearguard, you can discard Plant Gauge instead of retiring. And then it says once per turn, when your Vanguard is attacked, you can discard any number of Plant Gauge from this. For each one you discarded for that battle, your Vanguard gets plus 5k power. So the problem is of why this is kind of weak is that Granfia basically wanted to play more as like an aggro deck apparently, and this just basically made it into this like deck that now has to play more grade 3s to go away from that aggro game plan to do a turn 4 play that doesn't necessarily do too much. So just from what I've heard from Granfia players, this card just doesn't really do too much for it, and that's why it ends up in C tier. Sorry, not in C tier, in B tier. Then the Wilsren, this is just a decent support for Nanakrill. It's a grade 2 that on rear and Guardian Circle, if you have a Nanakrill Vanguard and your world is a Stray Garden, gets 5k power. And if you know you're not in Stray Garden, then this also gets plus 5k shield because Stray Garden can only be doing your turn. So 15k attacker, 10k shield, it's like decent. But end of turn, if your world is Stray Garden, this goes to Soul to draw you a card. So it does have the Paradise name, so of course it does help to match that. So for the time being, this card will definitely be played. But down the line, I feel like the more Stray, like the Paradise rearguards we get in the future, then cards like this might get cut. The card draw is appreciated though, like that's basically the only good thing about it. But I wonder if they'll give us this kind of card draw on more offensive bodies in the future. And then the final B tier card is the Lettuce. Lettuce is also a Paradise card, and it says you can retire it, choose the order from your drop, and for that turn you can play it from drop. But if you did play it, it goes to the bottom of the deck instead. So it lets you like recycle your orders beyond the 4 copies that you have. And then in the back row, once per turn, it says that when your unit is stood in the same column as this, then if your world is Stray Garden, you can also stand the Lettuce too. So again, it's a Stray Garden. It feels like it'll be played just because of that until we get better Stray Gardens. So for now, it does seem like a pretty okay card. Finally, some of the shout out C tier cards. We have Stirno. For that turn, she says if your Vanguard is a Flagberg, all of your other units in the same column as her get plus 5k power. So it's like Flagberg support just for the front row that, I mean, the front row is usually restanding like inlet and whatnot. So for that, I guess it is good. Oh, it definitely doesn't feel like it's really 2025 levels of support for an old ride line compared to what these other decks have been getting. Then we have the Tippa. There's also Magnolia support that gets plus 5k shield if your Vanguard is a Sylvan Horn Beast, and also cannot be retired by opponent's card effects. And once per turn, when your other unit attacks in the back row, if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater, Soul Blast 1, this gets plus 10k for the turn, but it's only once per turn. Not really a great card, but I guess it's like a budget replacement if you don't own some of the other big power gainer cards in Magnolia. But I feel like both of these effects have existed on a different card in Magnolia, so it really just feels like a budget replacement. And finally, we have the Yancha Pepino. Funny little name, but this is a Granfia support card. When discarded from hand during your turn, if your Vanguard's a Granfia, this goes to Soul. And in drop, if you have a Noblesse Rose card on the field, you can banish this to call a plant token to rear. So it makes a plant token, or I guess a plant gauge, either case. So this will be played, I guess, just because it's Granfia, but overall doesn't really feel like that good of a card. So Stoicheia, I think overall we have two decks that got really good support in both Argo Sirens, and Nanakrill I think really has good support of, like, not necessarily really good support here, but I think she has really good potential in the future after she's gotten a few more good of these, like, good copies of these Paradise cards. So for that reason, I think this gets a 4 to 5, despite how disappointing Granfia is. All right, and finally, let's go into Lyrical Monasterio. So for Lyrical this time, no S tier cards, but we have quite a lot in the A tier. Starting off with the Iris. She says, when placed on rear, look at top 7 for a sound system card, discard it and shuffle your deck. And when she's retired from rear, if your Vanguard is Artisaria, grade 3 or greater, you call a Shadow Memory token in the back row. What's really strong about the retire effect is that it doesn't stay during your turn. So if she's retired by being attacked into or by an effect during your opponent's turn, this will also spawn a Shadow Army token in the back row, which I think is really, really nice. The fact that it gives you deck thin for your orders is really nice because in the late game, like after you've searched them with your ride line, you just have them stuck in the deck. Top 7 can be enough to really just find what you're missing because the deck does have a little bit of draw power here and there. So personally speaking, I think this is a really big Artisaria support card, and it feels like it really does quite a lot with a simple effect in this deck too. The actual deck in the set, Juicy Fruity Chewarina, goes in A tier. I think it's okay, but not necessarily that great. It uses plant tokens, which is kind of surprising, but it gives all your plant tokens plus 5k power, and for every copy of this in your soul, gives them another plus 5k during both players' turns. And once per turn, she soul boss 1 to call 2 plant tokens to rear, and if your opponent's grade 3 or greater, and if you have 4 or more rear guards, she gets triple drive. So everything's getting triple drive very easily in this set. And when she attacks once per turn, you can count almost 1 to choose a plant token and call it, and for that turn give it the effect that it gains any trigger effects your Vanguard has on it, and when it's bounced back to hand from rearguard circle, it will draw you a card. So of course, when a plant token is bounced back, it disappears, but it basically turns into card draw if you choose to bounce it from something like a Yuika. So it's not too bad. I mean, this does 4 attacks. It makes 2 tokens, which are 10 or 15k bodies, depending. And it also, I mean, it can even be bigger bodies because it's for every copy of her in the soul, right? And she's also triple driving. So the Vanguard line itself is quite weak, kind of similar to Liel, but the tokens are quite strong. So it feels like it's kind of okay. And this deck got a lot of support in the set too. The rod line itself, the grade 1 basically says that when you place it, you reveal the grade 3 from your ride deck to call a plant token. And the grade 2 basically does the same thing. So you make 2 plant tokens before you even get to grade 3. Then another card I'll put in A tier is the Dinty. So she is a support for both Juicy Fruity and Artisaria. So when she is placed on a circle that a plant or any token is on, so it can be Shadow Army, can be plant, you can Counter Blast 1 or Soul Blast 2 to draw a card, and if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, for that turn, she gets plus 5k power too. So not so much worth calling over Shadow Army tokens, I guess, unless you really want to draw that one card and try to dig into something, but when you're calling this over a plant token, it's not too bad, especially early game. Like turn 2, calling this over plant token literally just converts it. But her other effect is when your token unit is called by your Vanguard over her, she goes back to hand. So this is good. And again, both Artisaria and Juicy Fruity being able to be a 5k shield you can get back to hand and then call again next turn or use as a guardian in both of these decks, which I think is also quite decent. Although I don't think she's necessarily triple rare support like levels comparing to the Iris. I think that card was really feels like a triple rare. And another card from the same deck that I'll put in A tier is the Nabiti. She says when discarded from your hand during your turn, she goes to soul, and after she boosts a token unit at the end of that battle, she goes to soul to countercharge 1. This again works in Artisaria as well, so this also gives countercharge to Artisaria, but also of course gives countercharge to Juicy Fruity too. And the final card in A will be the Shernarishu. So she is a friend's support. So she has the friend ability, which means that if you have another unit in the same column as her, they become friends. And then she has a bonus text line that says if you have 5 other friends, 5 or more other friends, then she says that all of your units in the same column as her get plus 5k. So that actually buffs both her and the thing in front of her by quite a lot. And when you call her outside of battle phase, if your Vanguard has the friend ability, Katamas 1, look at the top 5 cards of your deck and then choose a card with grade equal to or lower than your Vanguard. That is a unit card, reveal it. If it's different named with a friend ability from this card, then you can add it to your hand. But if it's not, you call it to rear and shuffle your deck. So basically, if it's the same card as her, you can call it. And if it's a non-friend, you can also call it, which is kind of interesting. So she kind of like enables, I guess, stuff like generics like Yuika and whatnot being usable in this deck a bit more, or being able to search them rather. Because to become friends, you just need one of the units in the column to have the friend ability. So that will still satisfy the condition. So I do think this is pretty good, especially for grade 1. I feel like she does a pretty good job for this deck. Then for the B tier cards, we have Almeria. This card says when placed on rear, if your Vanguard is Alicia fail, then she can choose a card from draw, put it to soul, and get plus 5k for the turn. And when she's put to soul from rear by your Alicia fail's ability, she can choose one of your back row rear guards and stand it. So that's quite good because you have a front row restanding rear guard in this deck already. So this gives you the back row restand to have a full column be unrestood. And what's also good is the on place effect helps you build the 6 soul you need for the divine skill as fast as possible, while also getting plus 5k. So feel like she does a good job in Lyrical, but nothing too flashy. And then the one other card I'll put in here is the Alphamel. This is a mermaid support, basically for Chris Rain. So once per turn, if your other rearguard has been bounced back to hand, if your Vanguard is a Great Rearguard or Mermaid, she can choose one of your units and give it plus 5k for the turn. So this is going to be, of course, used in both Kyrie as well as Chris Rain or any other mermaid decks for that matter. And then when she is bounced back to hand from rear, if your Vanguard is a Chris Rain, she can let you choose a card from your hand that is different name from this one and put it to the soul to draw one. So she'll build soul basically, but doesn't plus specifically. So you're cycling card for that one draw, which I guess is decent. So I'm not really sure if Chris Rain necessarily will use this. You can use that as a one-up because you do have a grade 1 searcher in the deck that does use 2 souls. So maybe the soul generation is more worth it than I think it is. And then moving on to the C tier stuff, we have first the Peroin. She says in rear and hand, if you have a Juicy Fruity Grade 3 or greater Vanguard that is attacked, start of the guard step, you can put this from hand or rear to soul to give the attacked unit plus 10k. So I feel like this will be used just because of that effect, not necessarily because it's that good, but it's just kind of designed for the Juicy Fruity deck. Then we have Wellinella. She says that when she finishes boosting a token, she Soul Blast 1 to bounce that token back to hand. So that basically activates the draw effect from your Juicy Fruity Vanguard. So that's like the only reason why you would want to play it, but it sounds like you will play it just for that. And then finally we have the Zeramone. She is a ghost. So she says during your battle phase, when your other unit is placed in the same column as this unit, once per turn, choose a normal unit from your hand and put it to the bottom of the deck to draw one. And if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, for that turn, the cold unit gets plus 5k. So this is basically in the ghost deck when you call out something that is, you drive check, get extra drive checks, call a normal unit, and then, you get a bunch of normal units in your hand from those extra drive checks, which then kind of means that you have a bit too little shield value, so this helps you to try to cycle into more of it. It's not necessarily a great card, but the plus 5k makes it kind of acceptable. So that's it for Lyrical. I think Lyrical overall is pretty average this set. The new deck isn't necessarily that great, but a lot of the support for Artisaria feels quite good. And some of the other decks that got support also feel decent, so I guess it's kind of in the average line, somewhere along like 3 out of 5. And that has been it for my ranking of this set. Overall, I do think that the set is not necessarily super good. I think a lot of nations got a lot of random stuff that doesn't seem very good, but there will be some standouts. I think Brandt Gate is a big standout of this set, and I think Keter is going to perform pretty well too, and Stoicheia would definitely not sleep on either. The big thing for this set in Japan in particular is the Bang Dream heal triggers, as well as the Ave Mujica crits. Those things, especially like Maigo, Ave Mujica, and like some of the Morphonica members, they go for a good penny because there's only 1 heal per box and there's 50 different heals and also 5 crits on top of that, so 55 different cards, you only get 20 in a case. Go figure. Some of those signs go for insane value. Like, it's actually ridiculous how much the Ave Mujica like stuff goes for. It's literally like if you're an Ave Mujica fan, you're trying to get those signs and playsets, it's gonna be insane. Luckily though, the secrets of this set are, well, the Liel one is really good, goes for a lot of money, definitely very worth, but some of the whiffs are really big whiffs, such as the Dragon Empire one or the Lyrical one. I guess when it comes to Keter, Stoicheia, and Brandt Gate, the secrets are good, and I guess also Jewel is also good secret, so as long as you don't whiff the 4 out of 6, you should be okay. But yeah, again, it feels like this set is kind of carried by the bonuses in it, not necessarily so much the card quality of the actual Vanguard cards in it, which is a little bit weird, unless you're Brandt Gate, of course, or Keter. Those nations are definitely eating very well. But with that, that's gonna be it for this first impressions. Let me know what you think of this format instead of the usual one, if you'd prefer me to just kind of like podcast and talk over the cards as usual. Obviously that's less pain to edit, so I wouldn't mind. So let me know in the comments below. With that though, that's gonna be it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.